everyone. We are back for Migraine Remedy Day 3. Yay! And I'm Marin Phoenix, and we have talked about the reasons why migraines happen. We've talked a little bit about ways in which you can relieve tension physically with your own hands and with visualizations. And today I want to start getting into a deeper layer of how to heal your migraine really at the source. So all of these techniques, the physical techniques of releasing the pressure and physically moving the migraine, are super important, and they're really helpful, especially if you have a migraine. But they're not necessarily going to get down to the source, right? They're gonna move the energy. They're going to be helpful, but there's big emotional release that is just wanting to come to the surface. That's just wanting to come up. Some processing, and moving the energy physically is only going to get a part of it. So today we are going to talk about how to get a little bit deeper into why this migraine is happening in the first place. So in order to do that, there's this super important quality that we want to develop in ourselves, and this was so big for me. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. Way back 5 years ago, I had the hardest time hearing my body because there was this great big voice in the way, and it's called your inner critic. And this voice can jump up and start berating you, start talking to you about how stupid you are, or how ugly you are, or all of these horrible things about you that are just not true. And when that voice is so loud, it's so hard to hear what our body's saying. It kind of overwhelms everything, all the messages that we are getting from our body, and getting down to that deeper truth. So these two qualities that we want to develop within ourselves are non-judgment and curiosity. And these are so big for really getting down to this root cause. And the non-judgment really is about non-judgment of ourselves and non-judgment of others. Because often when a migraine comes up, there's something that is going on with another person or in your environment, something that you're doing, that you're participating in, that's not really resonating with your authentic self, with what you believe inside. So to give you an example, well, I've given a lot of examples about different things with that. I'll just stay with the critic thing for now. When you're faced with this sense of non-judgment, developing non-judgment, right? We can often start to override our better intentions. We can start to override our beliefs about ourselves, our confidence, when we start to go into judgment of ourselves and of others. So what does that look like? Okay, judgment of ourselves. Perfect example, many years ago, 5 years ago or so, and this is a lifelong journey, right? I would often hear something. So say I was in an argument with my partner, and he would say something like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you didn't notice that. Can't believe you didn't see that. That article came up and you didn't even read it, and gosh, like you're just like a block or something." So now, whether that's true or not, my internal voice at the time, my critic, started to go into self-judgment. So I started to say, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe this." And at the same time, started to go into judgment of him. Well, how stupid is he, and how rude, and he's so mean. And so we start this big dialogue, right, about ourselves, and we start this big dialogue about other people. And that generates a lot of heat up here. That burns a lot of water, and it creates that really strong anger reaction, and it fuels it, lends fuel to the fire, rather than calming it rather than getting down to what's going on here. And that's the deeper question. What's going on here? Because there's usually something much deeper than what's on the surface. And so, really calming that voice. So, when the critic starts to jump up, you start to berate yourself. You start to tell yourself how stupid you are, how incompetent, how not pretty, or whatever it is. Like really, just sitting with that and saying, "Whoa, hey, what's going on here?" Combating that with developing a sense of curiosity, right? And realizing that those statements, this critic, they're just not true. They're just not true. And they're overriding deeper messages and deeper wisdom that could be coming up for you. So in that situation, say my partner, oh well, this just happened, so this is perfect. We'll go into this. Yay, sharing about my life. So the other day, my partner was mad about the kitchen, right? I'm not very my priority, the kitchen is not my priority. I'm always about cleaning and vacuuming all the kids' spaces and making sure that's all clean. But this kitchen sink they can't reach, so it's last on my priority list. But it's first on his, right? So he's like, "Oh man, I'm so mad that, you left dishes all over the kitchen again. This is super frustrating. Like, why do you do that?" Right? And so in the past, my self-critic would have started to kind of berate myself like, "Oh man, you can't even get the kitchen clean, like gosh, you're just so failing as a mom and like as a partner, and why can't you keep it all together?" So in the past. Thankfully, this is what happens when you do this work for a long time is you kind of take a moment to pause and just say, "Okay, wait, what's going on here?" In the past, my judgment side would have just gone after him like, "What, you can't clean the kitchen? Do you see everything that I do?" And you see how if that monologue was going on inside my head, it starts to generate this really intense energy, heat, anger. All of that starts to bubble up, bottle up, create pressure. And can you see how that could lead to a migraine, right? But if you calm that response, if you check that at the door, what's going on here, right? And for him, it wasn't about the dishes. It was just about feeling seen. It was about having space. I'm a mom. I take care of my kids. They're like my number one priority. And sometimes he kind of disappears. And he wasn't feeling seen. So it's not about the dishes. And if we are able to get beneath the judgment, if we're able to get beneath the critic, then we can start to, number one, not generate all that energy, but we can really get down to what's going on really in a deep level. And that is where you're going to find the cure for your migraine. It's amazing. And when you're doing this migraine work, what you're going to be looking for, so that's the first part, is really really cultivating this sense of non-judgment of others, non-judgment of yourself, and really paying attention to that critic and hearing when that critic pops up. And then just ask yourself, is that true? God, you're so stupid. Is that true? Am I stupid? No. No, I'm not stupid. Oh God, you're so ugly. Is that true? No. No, I'm not ugly. So, you can just go on over there. You're not helpful. Quiet down. It's just not true. So really paying attention. That's one of the home plays today, is to just really start to track that critic, start to track that judgment. See if you can find a moment when you get in an argument or somebody says something to you that just makes you want to react. See if you can find a few breaths. See if you can get in that moment and just say, what's going on here? Have that curiosity. Start to develop that curiosity about yourself and about others. And then the second part, which is why the curiosity and the non-judgment is so important, is that migraines happen because we're triggered, right? There's something that is triggering this migraine in us. And typically, right, when we talk about triggers and migraines, we're talking about like, oh man, like dairy triggers a migraine for me, or this certain perfume, this certain smell triggers a migraine for me, or when I work out and my muscles get really tense, that triggers a migraine for me. That's the typical triggers that we hear about. I know all about them. I went through all my triggers. Like I did massages and I did yoga and I did oh my gosh, Chinese herbs and acupuncture and acupressure and oh my goodness, the whole gamut. So that's not the kind of triggers that we're talking about here. And while those are really wonderful techniques and helpful for releasing stress and releasing pressure and helping us kind of work stress out of our body at a body and cellular level, there is an emotional level that is wanting to be seen and heard and released as well. So that's the kind of trigger that we're going to talk about today. So triggers meaning, I'll tell you a story. So a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, I had a very, very close friend. And after several years of close friendship, I I became a mom and I stepped away from the friendship a little bit. I got pretty consumed with my firstborn. That often happens. And at this point, about a year after my son was born, um, this really close friend that I love dearly let me know that I was not being a good friend and told me all the ways that I was not being a good friend. And let me tell you, I got a migraine so bad that day, so hard. And at first I was kind of like, what the hell, right? Because a lot of times, especially if you're used to getting migraines, especially if you've had this pattern of getting migraines for some time, you're kind of like, oh man, there's another migraine. And it doesn't even necessarily track. It's to wait, what's going on today? So I'm telling this story of like, yes, I had this really painful moment with this friend and then I got a migraine, but I didn't see it right away. And it wasn't like I read the text and then I was like, oh wow. It takes a little bit of time. So later on in the day, as I'm sitting with, okay, what's going on today? Having developing that sense of curiosity. So this is, you can see why the curiosity is super important. And the non-judgment. So as I'm sitting there with, okay, what's going on today? And I start listing out and thinking about, well, what's happening in my life? Who have I been talking to? Is there any tension? Is there any sticking point? Do I have any anger? This conversation comes up and I realize, wow, I have a lot of emotion around that. And I kind of stuffed it down, as many of us often do when we have a big painful thing like that, like a really, really good friend that we care about, doesn't tells us how awful we are. That really, really can hurt. So I stuffed it down and I realized there was a really big emotional release that needed to happen. So that is a trigger. So the trigger is an argument, or it could be, as we talked about in the previous couple days, it could be smelling a certain smell that associates you back with an experience that you had with someone or an event that happened that was very hurtful or traumatic or made you upset or angry. It could be your environment. It could be going to work, right? If you're in a job that you really hate and you see that sign when you come in the door and you're like, oh God, here again. There's so many triggers that could be, and there's deeper layers under that. So the trigger is simply that, it's a trigger, right? There's a deeper belief, and I'm not going to get into that because this is just the beginning of the journey, right? So first it's sorting, you know, getting into the beginning steps, and then, you get deeper as you go on. But just keeping that in mind, that there's some deeper and deeper layers, and that's what coaching is all about, right? That's what longer containers and being held in a coaching container are for. But just right here, just kind of recognizing that there are triggers that happen, and you can do a lot of work in curing and healing your migraine, especially on the spot, by recognizing what that trigger is. So today's home play is to really start to track your critic, really start to just be aware, just develop a sense of awareness of how am I treating myself? What am I generating a lot of anger and hate and criticism and heat, right? Because all of that generates heat. Energy is heat. In my body, how am I judging other people? Am I spending a lot of energy in this like anger state with somebody else or with a situation, environment, driving in the car? Oh man, all these drivers. Oh, what are you doing? Ah, right? Like a lot of stuff, a lot of heat, a lot of energy, a lot of anger can come up. And so tracking that, the criticism, the judgment, replacing that with a sense of curiosity. Huh, I wonder why that guy cut me off. Maybe he had to get somewhere really fast. Wonder if maybe his, you know, grandfather is on his deathbed and he needs to get there in time, right? Developing a sense of curiosity. Why is my partner so upset right now? I can't, it's not about the dishes. What is this? What's going on here? Wow, why am I beating myself up right now? Why am I so angry at myself? Am I scared? Like, what's going on? So, developing that sense of curiosity. And then the second part of the home play, and I encourage you to write these down, right? This is so powerful. As you're going through your day, carrying your phone or a little notebook or something, and when you hear that critic for the first time and you start to like recognize that voice and you're like, oh my gosh, well, you're kind of mean. And just write down what the critic says. So it's like you just call that critic out, call yourself out. Gosh, this is what I thought about someone. This is what I said about them. Woo, in my head, you know? So really writing it down helps you really see it and really call it out so you can create that the space to change that. And then the second part is to start paying attention, right? So if you have a migraine right now, think back over the last couple days. What's going on in your life? Who have you been talking to? It's the holidays, right? Did you have a conversation with Aunt Pat and she brought up the relationship thing again and you're like, oh my gosh, and that, was a trigger for you. So just kind of sit with what has been going on in my life. Where do I feel tension? And you can look at all areas from, your relationships to your environment to heck, what you gave or got for Christmas, every little thing that's been going on. Just go run through it and see where there's parts of tension. Like when you're thinking back through your day, see where your heart kind of starts, oh man, or you have a response inside. Start feeling into your body. Oh, God, that really pissed me off. Write that down, right? And start tracking that. And tomorrow, so this is the first 2 days, we have some physical exercises to help move energy, and now we're really getting into the emotional side, and we'll talk about emotional releases and how you get really deeper into where is this migraine coming from tomorrow. But just starting today with this sense of curiosity, non-judgment, really cultivating that for yourself and for others, and starting to recognize triggers. All right. See you tomorrow for Migraine Remedy Day 4.